Hello everypony, this is Lord Thunder with my very first fanfiction reading. The story I have for today is called The Best Medicine, and it is by a friend of mine, Zaptiftun, at the Acorn Cafe. It's a very good story, very emotional when I read it, and I think you guys might enjoy it, so let's begin. Part 1 of The Best Medicine. Rainbow Dash flitted about over Ponyville one Friday morning, snickering to herself as she headed for Sugar Cube Corner. She had just gotten the idea for an awesome prank on Applejack, and she knew Pinkie Pie was always up for a good prank. Not to mention she needed Pinkie's help in acquiring the flour and food coloring that would be needed. She glided down the street and landed in front of the confectionery shop's front door, still snickering as she trotted inside. The bell above the door chimed daintily, and a familiar blue mare appeared from the kitchen. "Oh, good morning, Rainbow Dash," Mrs. Cake greeted pleasantly. "Hiya, Mrs. Cake. Is Pinkie Pie around? I need her help with something." "Well, sorry, dear, but she's not here." "Oh, she making a delivery somewhere?" Mrs. Cake shook her head. "No, she's gone out of town for her other job. For the day, and she's going to visit her family for the next week. I don't expect her to be back until Thursday night." Dash tilted her head, very much puzzled. "She has a second job? Since when?" "Oh, she didn't tell you about that?" Mrs. Cake asked, her turn to be puzzled. "Yes, every Friday now she goes up to Canterlot for the day. I'm afraid that's about all I know about it." Dash's face scrunched in confusion as she tried to understand what was being told. "No, she didn't tell me. When did this start?" "Oh, about 2 weeks ago. She left only an hour ago. You might still be able to catch her if you really need to talk to her." Dash nodded slowly. Yeah, thanks, Mrs. Cake." "You're welcome, dear," she called as Dash left the shop. The Pegasus took to the air in a lazy climb, her mind churning over the information she had just received. She was miffed at Pinkie for not telling her, or any of their friends that she knew of, that she would be gone for the weekend, or that she even had another job for that matter. She was also confused. What sort of job would Canterlot have that Ponyville wouldn't, and why would she go all the way there for it? Why did she get another job? Was she short on money and needed another source of income? Her mind discarded the last idea. She or any of their friends would be more than willing to help Pinkie out if she was having financial difficulties. Besides, about the only things Pinkie bought were party supplies and prank props, and, since they were purchased in great bulk, were not particularly expensive. At least not that she was aware of. She frowned and shook her head. This morning had become rather confusing. Dash looked around and realized that she had subconsciously flown off in the general direction of Canterlot. She could see the palace jutting out of the mountain ahead and just to the left. She banked slowly to the left towards the main road between Ponyville and Canterlot. It was a 2-hour trot to Equestria's capital city from Ponyville, which was why the train was a far more popular mode of transit and was even shorter by air. As it was, she was already about a quarter of the way to the city, meaning that she should have caught up to Pinkie by now. The main road appeared below her, and she began scanning for her friend. It occurred to her that she really didn't know why she was looking for Pinkie, at least not consciously anyway. She shrugged it off as just being curious, and it wasn't like she had anything planned for the day in any case. She had the day off from Weather Patrol, her first Friday off in a month in fact, which is why she hadn't previously noticed Pinkie's absence in the last 2 weeks. A splotch of pink below caught her eye. She grinned, knowing that she had found her quarry. She had just trotted by the southeast road that led to Trottingham, a 2 days' journey through Hoofington, and was now approaching the east road which marked the halfway point between Ponyville and Canterlot. She bounced along happily, seemingly unaware of the Technicolor Pegasus slowly flying towards her. Dash snickered to herself, her mischievous side showing through. Her plan was to glide quickly but silently right up behind the pink earth pony and yell, "Boo!" right in her ear. A simple prank, but still an effective one. She twisted her wings slightly to alter her descent angle as the distance between her and Pinkie steadily dropped. Dash's grin grew wider. Closer. Right turn. Wait, what? It took Dash a second to realize that Pinky was no longer in front of her, and another second to realize that the tree in front of her wasn't going to move out of the way. She flared her wings in a desperate attempt to arrest her speed and twisted her body to shift her flight path enough to avoid the tree. The majestic oak passed to her right scant millimeters from her wingtip, and she heaved a sigh of relief. At that instant, as she later claimed, a bush jumped out and tackled her. After a minute of struggling through the foliage and coughing up a very confused butterfly, Dash extricated herself from the bush, being slightly worse for wear. She shook some twigs and leaves out of her wings before casting a confused glance back toward the west road that Pinky had turned onto. It didn't make sense. Mrs. Cake told her that Pinky was working in Canterlot, but the east road led to Manhattan, nearly a full day's trot. Something just didn't add up. What had started out as a venture to satiate curiosity had now become a true mystery, one that for some reason Rainbow Dash had felt driven to solve. She took to the air once again to track down her friend. Amazingly, Dash's rough landing hadn't caught Pinky's attention. The pink pony continued hopping along and humming happily to herself. Every now and again, she'd say hi to a fellow traveler passing by as Dash kept watch high above from a cloud she had whipped up. Having her head buried in the cloud to see the bottom awarded her with a number of odd looks from passing Pegasi, none of which she paid heed to or even noticed. She followed Pinky like this for half an hour before the Earth Pony turned onto a secondary road, back in the general direction of Canterlot. Dash wasn't familiar with this route, and she didn't know of any other ways to the city from this direction. She realized a few minutes later that the road didn't lead to Canterlot, but to a complex of modern buildings nestled among the foothills just inside the city limits. The road ended in a paved lot in the center of the complex where chariots and carriages were parked. From there, several paved walkways led to most of the surrounding buildings. Dash landed behind a carriage and peeked around it in time to see Pinkie Pie enter what she assumed to be the main building. Her curiosity was further piqued when she saw the sign out front. "Greater Equestria Medical Clinic and Research Center," she said to herself. "Pinkie Pie, what the hey are you doing here?" She trotted up to the main doors and entered just as Pinkie finished talking to a receptionist at the service desk and bounced down the hall to the right. Dash followed at a discreet distance, being careful not to lose sight of her among the patients, nurses, and orderlies milling about. Few, if any, of those in the hallways seemed to take notice of the bouncing bubble-gum pink Earth Pony or the colorful Pegasus as they passed by. Dash tailed Pinkie through the maze of hallways for several minutes, all the while wondering what her friend was doing here. Okay, she thought, reasons for being in a hospital. Number 1, she works there. Number 2, she's sick. And number 3, she's visiting some pony who is sick. The first reason she ruled out almost immediately. Pinkie was a baker, party maker, not a doctor. The thought of her trying her hoof at something medical made Dash shudder. As for the other 2 reasons, she wasn't aware of Pinkie being sick, but neither had Pinkie mentioned a friend or family member being here. Her thought process was interrupted as Pinkie made a sudden left turn and disappeared from sight, causing the Pegasus to quicken her pace. She rounded the corner and quickly came to a stop, a frown creasing her face. She'd lost her quarry. It appeared that she had followed Pinkie into another reception area, this one slightly smaller and less busy as the one she had entered the building through, also having a pair of glass doors leading to the outside. She craned her neck to catch a glimpse of Pinkie, but to no avail. It was time for a new approach. "Excuse me," she said as she advanced to the service desk. The receptionist, an older bespectacled green mare, looked over her narrow glasses at her. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, see, I was trying to, follow?" "Yeah, that wouldn't sound suspicious at all." "Find a friend of mine, and I'm pretty sure she came through here. Pink Earth Pony, mane and tail look like cotton candy, bouncing around like her legs are made of strings. Seen her?" "Ew, you mean Miss Pinkie Pie?" asked a voice behind her. Dash jumped and turned to see a dark brown unicorn wearing a white lab coat and a pair of thick-framed glasses. The stethoscope hanging around his neck denoted him as a doctor. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he said with an apologetic smile. I just overheard what you were saying, and your description sounds like Miss Pie." Dash regarded the doctor suspiciously. Yeah, that's her. How do you know her? I met her several years ago when she was working at the cancer treatment wing. Dr. Patches? A nurse carrying the clipboard interrupted. Here are the medical records you asked for. Oh, thank you, Isabel, he said, his horn shimmering as the clipboard levitated before him. Dash wasn't sure what shocked her more, the fact that Pinky had been at the cancer wing, or that the doctor just practically forgot about her as he studied the records intensely. An awkward period of silence followed as she waited for Dr. Patches to continue. However, after he flipped through several pages on the clipboard, it became apparent he wasn't going to. So, cancer treatment? Dash faintly prodded. Oh, yes, that's where I met her. A sad time that was. He paused and flipped the page back and forth a couple times to check some details. She came a few weeks ago when she heard I was heading up the new research program and volunteered for it. Research program? She asked hesitantly. The doctor levitated a pen out of his pocket and made a notation before answering. Yes, it's for patients with severe and terminal illnesses. Dash felt her blood freeze. She's a very brave young mare, he continued. Remarkable that she would come back from something like this, given all the hardships she's been through. Tell me, has she always... He looked up to find Rainbow Dash nowhere to be found. A confused frown crossed his face. How very odd. She didn't feel the wind on her face or the sun shining on her back, and her hooves didn't recognize the grass beneath her. She had bolted out of the building and ran into the courtyard. She didn't care if any ponies saw her. She needed to get away from that building. She finally stopped next to a tree, her breath coming in ragged huffs. How could this be? It was impossible. She was always so full of life, always spreading smiles and cheer, always making sure every pony was happy. It just wasn't fair. Cancer? Terminal? Dash felt as though she'd been punched in the gut. No, please, Celestia, no. She leaned against the tree and let the searing tears come. I just simply cannot believe it, dear. Yeah, you sure you didn't inhale something while you were up there and kind of imagine all this? Dash had flown back to Ponyville as soon as she had calmed herself enough and gathered the others together at the library. Understandably, they were not very receptive of her news, Rarity and Applejack being the first to speak after she related her story. It doesn't make sense, Rainbow, Twilight added. Why wouldn't Pinkie Pie tell us if she was having medical treatment? I don't know, she huffed, irritated that her friends didn't believe her. All I know is that she went to a hospital for some sort of terminal disease research program that she volunteered for, and she was in the cancer treatment wing a few years ago. That's the other thing, Applejack interjected. You're telling us that she went in for cancer treatment, but I don't remember any time ever where I didn't see her bouncing around town or at the farm down there every day. And that sort of thing takes a lot out of you, don't it? I've never seen her sort of energy except in 7 in the morning after an all-night party. Well, that's not entirely true, Rarity thought out loud. I do seem to recall her going to bed unusually early a few times, now that I think about it. Well, early for her, I suppose. But I didn't know her too well at the time and never thought too much of it. And besides, this is Pinkie Pie we're talking about, AJ. She's a living embodiment of a sugar rush. I think she's got plenty to spare, Dash pointed out. Alright, I'll give you that, the farm pony allowed. But those treatments take up a lot of time, and yet she's always hanging around town. If she did go up for them things, when did she do it? She went up in the evening and spent the night at Canterlot before coming back in the morning. Silence filled the library following the quiet revelation. All eyes turned to Fluttershy, who had remained silent up to that point. The shy Pegasus fidgeted under the new attention. Twilight tilted her slightly in questioning curiosity. Fluttershy, do you know something about this? She stammered. No, I mean, well, not exactly. It's just, there was a time a few years back where Pinkie would stop by my cottage in the evening and ask if I could watch Gummy for her, because she was going to be gone for the night. When I asked her about it, she said she had business in Canterlot. She was always smiling when she came back in the morning to pick up Gummy, but it was that sad, tired sort of smile. Noting that her four friends were staring at her with wide eyes, she ducked her head with a squeak. That's all I know. I'm sorry. It took a few minutes for the ponies to digest the new information. a sense of dread filling each of them. At last, Twilight spoke. So, this means that she did go to Canterlot several times around the time the doctor said he met her in cancer treatment, and that she was unusually exhausted on a few occasions at that time. So it is possible that she was going there for some sort of treatment then. She swallowed hard, the revelation causing bile to well up in her throat. This Applejack removed her hat and ran a hoof through her mane. This can't be. I mean, why her? It's cancer, Rarity said sadly. It doesn't care who you are. Dash threw her hooves in the air. This is ridiculous. She's going through all this stuff, but she hasn't told us anything about it, and we're her closest friends. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting to the bottom of this. And how do you reckon on doing that? Applejack asked. How else? Pin her down and make her tell us. Rainbow Miriam Dash, I know you're upset, but that's no way to handle this, and certainly no way to act towards her in her condition. If she has one, which we still don't know, Twilight scolded. Dash rolled about to the unicorn in exasperation. Aw, come on, Twilight, what more do you need? She's been to the hospital in Canterlot a bunch of times years ago, where she met some cancer treatment doctor, and now she's gone back as a volunteer for some sort of terminal disease research. Heck, the doctor even said that she was brave for coming back after all she's been through. What do you make of that, huh? She poked Twilight forcefully in the chest with her hoof to drive the point home. Applejack quickly grabbed the Pegasus' shoulder and pulled her back. Cool it, Rainbow, she said calmly. We're all just as worried about Pinky as you are, Twilight included. She just handles it different, being all practical-like. Indeed, and I must say that I'm inclined to agree with her in this case, Rarity added. We don't have any solid proof that our dear Pinky has cancer or has had any such treatment. Only assumptions based on bits of information that seem to correspond with each other, which I must admit makes for a rather strong case in favor of your assumptions, Rainbow. Applejack nodded. I know often this happens, but I agree with Rarity. I believe your story and all, but we need some proper proof that Pinky's sick before we go off all half-cocked. I vote for the calm and reasonable approach, Fluttershy said quietly. Dash glanced about the room, meeting the eyes of each of her friends. Taking a few calming breaths, she sighed and hung her head. I'm sorry, girls, I didn't mean to go off like that. It's just this whole thing's really thrown me for a loop, you know? She lifted her eyes to Twilight. I'm really sorry for snapping at you, Twi. You're right, I don't have any proof that anything's wrong with her, but everything that I found out seems to fit. Twilight rested a hoof on her friend's withers with an understanding smile. It's okay, Rainbow. I think most of us would react like that if we were in your hooves. I believe everything you've said, and I agree that there's something going on here, but I just don't know. Maybe Pinky would hide something like this. From us just so we wouldn't worry, but I'd rather talk to her first before jumping to that conclusion. The Pegasus nodded. Yeah, I guess that'd be the best thing to do. That settles it then, Applejack said as she started for the door. We'll head on over to Sugar Cube Corner and have ourselves a nice calm conversation with her about what's going on. Mrs. Cake said she was also going to visit her family and wouldn't be back until next Thursday, Dash interjected. Applejack froze in front of the door, her hoof halfway to the doorknob. Dash rubbed the back of her neck self-consciously. I guess I forgot to mention that, didn't I? The far pony pursed her lips at the new information. Like I said, we'll have ourselves a nice, calm conversation with her about what's going on when Shay gets back. Little mention was made among the fight ponies of Pinky's supposed situation over the next week, though it was at the forefront of the thoughts of each of them. What if Dash was right and Pinky really did have a terminal illness? How would that change their friendship knowing that time for the pink party pony was slowly ticking away? Would they be able to handle watching her become increasingly less energetic until she could no longer even leave her bed? How would Pinky herself handle it when she'd be unable to throw parties she loved so dear? The questions and uncertainty tore at each of them as the week progressed, but they could know nothing for certain until Pinky returned and they were able to get the full story from her. At last, Thursday came. They had all agreed to be at Sugar Cube Corner that night so they could talk to her as soon as she returned. The Cakes did not object to the group staying in the shop after closing time. After all, it was common for Pinky to invite them over for little get-togethers. The couple only asked that they keep the noise to a minimum to avoid waking the twins. How do you think we ought to go about this, Twi? Applejack asked after the Cakes had gone upstairs. I'm not really sure, she answered with a frown. I've been trying to figure that out all week, and I haven't been able to come up with something that would allow us to see into asking her what's going on. Dash groaned. Seriously? We can't just straight up ask her if she's got cancer? What's the point in beating around the bush on it? Something of this nature requires a certain amount of delicacy and finesse, dear, Rarity replied as she sipped from a cup of tea, eager for his calming effects. If we're too forceful about it, it may cause her to withdraw from us and hide her problem more deeply. I personally can't imagine our dear Pinky doing such a thing, but I would rather approach her in a calm, easy manner, in a way in which she knows we care about her and lets her know that she can trust us. The prismatic Pegasus sat down at the table with a sigh. Yeah, I get that and all. It's just, ever since Gilda visited, we've gotten to be really close, you know? Like closer than any friend I've ever had. You didn't see what I saw when we threw her to that surprise birthday party and I had to go get her. I won't lie, it scared me. But I got her to the barn and we brought her out of it. Then she had that nightmare not too long ago and I ended up staying with her until she went to sleep. Fluttershy nodded. I remember. You asked us the next morning to come here and help her so the shop didn't fall behind on sales while she slept. Right, but my point is that during those times I was there for her, I could help her. Her eyes drifted to the tabletop. Her next words weighed heavily on her. But I can't do that now. This is something else entirely. I can do a sonic rain boom, I can dodge Cory eels, I can whip up a thunderstorm in 10 seconds flat. Tears pulled at the corners of her eyes as she laid her head on the table. But this, I can't do anything to help her. I can't make it go away. I'd trade places with her in a second if I could. Applejack leaned over and nuzzled her friend. We know you would, Sugar Cube. They don't call you loyalty for nothing. Twilight laid her hoof on the Pegasus' withers and hugged her. I know it's difficult, Rainbow, she said, and we all care for Pinky very much too. But like I said before, we still don't have the full picture of what's going on or her side of the story. A story? Ooh, is it a mystery? Or an adventure? Or is it an adventure or mystery, like Daring Do? Every pony's head whipped around to see Pinkie Pie standing in the doorway. Her head tilted to one side when she saw Rainbow Dash. Was it a sad Daring Do story? Is that why Dashy's crying? Pinky! Cried a yellow blur as it tackled the pink party pony. Fluttershy's uncharacteristic behavior had become a sort of running gag between her and Pinky after their first trip to Appaloosa, and was now their traditional greeting if they hadn't seen each other in a while. Dash used the distraction to quickly dry her eyes and join the others in welcoming back their friend. Hugs were exchanged all around before Rarity spoke up. How was your trip, darling? Pinky beamed happily as she hopped up to the table where they had been sitting. Pinky beamed happily as she hopped up to the table where they had been sitting. Fabulously fantastic fun, she chirped as she snarfed down a cupcake that had been left sitting out. The family reunion was a blast. Every pony was there. Mom, Dad, Inky and Blinky, Grandpa Pie, Aunt Rhubarb, Cousin It. No, wait, wrong family. Aunt Meringue, second cousin, twice removed Kiwi, and even Uncle Alfalfa, but most ponies call him Weird Alfalfa. I don't know why. You know he's the one who taught me how to come up with all my songs? He's super awesome. And then we had cake and pie and games, and I got to decorate the barn just like I did for my very first party ever when I got my cutie mark. Her narrative was interrupted by a huge yawn. Are you feeling tired, Pinky? Twilight asked. Her brow creased with concern. Yepers, she replied cheerfully. But it's a good kind of tired, you know, like when you spend a whole week having fun and catching up with family, forgetting to get some sleep. Which is exactly what happened. She giggled and grabbed another cupcake as she sat down on the table. What about you guys? Did you do anything fun while I was gone? There was a round of half-mumbled replies as each of her friends spoke before realizing they had nothing to report. In the awkward silence, Pinky glanced at each of them with an expectant smile on her face. After a few minutes, Dash spoke up, unable to stand the tension any longer. She needed to know if Pinky was sick, and she needed to know now. Get enough of this. Listen, Pinky. Yes? Pinky's cheerful smile and sunny disposition sucked the wind out of Dash's sail as she turned her attention to the Pegasus. Her original motivation lost, Dash glanced to the others for help, their own eyes filled with concern and worry. She decided that perhaps the delicate approach really was the best way to get to the bottom of things. look, she said at last. Last week I swung by here to talk to you, but you weren't here. Mrs. Cake said that you just left to go to your second job in Canada, but I'd never heard of you having a second job, so... She was cut off by Pinky jumping into the air with an enormous gasp. I never told you girls about my other job. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot, she gasped again. You should totally come with me tomorrow. Come with you? Fluttershy stuttered. Trust me, it'll be so much fun. Pinky nodded excitedly. Fun? Applejack mouthed dark confusion to Twilight, who could only shrug in response. Well, of course we'll come with you, darling, Rarity said soothingly. That is, if you're certain you want us to. Of course I want you to, Pinky giggled. I would have asked you if I didn't want you to come. That would have been just silly. Her giggle was interrupted by another huge yawn. Oh, well, I guess I'm a lot more tired than I thought. With a thump, the party pony's face hit the table and a soft snore followed. Her friends gathered around, each with perplexed but unsurprised expressions at Pinky's behavior. Rainbow Dash was the first to speak. You've got to be friggin' kidding me, she grumbled. We waited a whole week to get an answer from her, and she falls asleep before we get it. I know you're frustrated, Rainbow, but she did invite us to go with her, so we'll find out tomorrow what exactly is going on, said Twilight. Dash sighed bitterly. I know. All this waiting is just... Ugh! I'm going home. I'll see you guys in the morning. With that, she trotted out the door and disappeared into the night. I suppose we should all go home, Twilight said as she turned to the others. Rarity, would you mind putting Pinky to bed? The fashionista nodded. Certainly, Twilight. Would you like some help? Fluttershy offered. That would be most appreciated, dear. Thank you. As the two carried Pinky up the stairs, Twilight and Applejack started clearing off the table. So what do you think? Twilight asked at length. Rainbow's just frustrated is all, Applejack answered. This whole thing's gotten her pretty wound up pretty tight. The unicorn nodded. I figured that much, but I was referring to Pinkie Pie. Oh, right, sorry. She chuckled sheepishly. I honestly can't say, Twi. Any other time I'd say she was just being herself, but with everything our day told us, either Pinky's not telling us 'cause she don't want us to worry. Or do you think that it's possible there might not be anything wrong with her at all? Twilight asked, a tinge of hope in her voice. Or do you think it's possible there might not be anything wrong with her at all? Twilight asked, a tinge of hope in her voice. Applejack simply shrugged, drawing a sigh from the scholar. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Or you think it's possible there might not be anything wrong with her at all? Twilight asked, a tinge of hope in her voice. Applejack simply shrugged, drawing a sigh from the scholar. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Reckon we will. End of part 1.